Hi everybody, welcome.
Yay!
NoStalgia.
Yeah. My name is Kirk Reed.
I'm Colette Elliott.
And we're from the Pacific Northwest Collage Collective.
Yeah. The Pacific Northwest Collage Collective, I started it with my friend Laura 5 years ago. And we're so excited to be here in this beautiful space. If you are not a member, it is free. We do all free activities. We like to do a big show like this every year, and we do meetups every other month. So please come up to one of us, or there's a QR code over there on the table that you can scan with your phone and register to be a member. And we will not spam you, I promise. So yeah, we're so excited for today. This is a lot more people than I was expecting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Should we get it started?
Perfect, let's go.
All right, go.
I'm gonna start, and then I'll be calling you up in mostly alphabetical order by first name. There will be exceptions. My name is Kirk Reed. These are my two pieces for this show. One of the things that I really love about this space is it really matches the aesthetics and values of the Pacific Northwest Collage Collective and my own personal values, which is it walks between the worlds of professional, community, and open to all. And that is a really delicate walk through the world. And so our collective is very much all ages, all levels. We always have someone who's never collaged before, and they will be sitting next to someone who might have a solo show in Poland going on. Everyone like obsessively talks about what adhesive they use. So these pieces are pieces that I made using telephone pole scraps from Portland telephone poles, and they also include some risograph images that I made at the Independent Publishers Research Center, which is absolutely another organization that walks the line between professional and open to all. And Anne is with us today. She's an artist and she's on the board and really involved in all of that. If you haven't checked out that place, it's incredible. So yeah, I'm just really honored to have met so many of you artists and that you're participating and that we get to do this. And I want to thank Art at the Cave for just being so gracious to us. This is how a community works. Sherry connected us and told us about this thing. Kevin went to a poetry reading here, met Greg, who does a second Saturday collage meetup here, which is a great meetup. And then we started talking about doing an annual, like a group show here, and then it happened. So that's how it goes. Next up, I want to bring up Amy Mower.
My name is Amy, and I'm not actually a part of the Collage Collective. I'm going to be though, and I'm sort of.
You're now.
I'm now. I have joined. I belong. I've been a lifelong artist, and I was trying to think for this talk how long I've been doing collage, and I had a really strong memory. And I think it is one of those core memories that stays with you creatively of being in kindergarten, and thank God for art teachers, right? You know, she had this fantastic book of wallpaper samples. And I remember digging through that book and cutting out those thick, wonderful pieces of paper with all the wonderful printing on them and thicknesses and patterns. And I believe we were doing like an alphabet book, and like B was for Baker. And I remember cutting out this really ornate paper for his jacket, right? And I was like, you know, it's no wonder I'm still cutting out paper and doing this, because that just stayed with me. And you know, all throughout my art journey, I keep coming back to collaging in one way or another, or some kind of mixed media. When I went to college, and I learned a whole lot of other techniques, and I paint a lot, still, the collage would find its way back into those paintings, gluing things on there, painting, adding stuff. And about maybe 15 years ago, when I left college, I just got a regular job. I wasn't working professionally as an artist, and I kind of took a long break of not being very creative, not indulging that. And so I decided I wanted to get back into it, and I started with collage. I started doing artist trading cards. They're small, and I was like, this is like a good little creative practice. They're small, and I can just cut things out. And so I did that. And so it just kept evolving. And I also, I don't know, I'm sure everyone here who does a lot of collage, I make like cards for all my friends. It's their birthday, I'd make a funny card for them, right? You know, and I always think humor comes into my work because of that, I'm always looking for the irony and the humor of mixing the pictures and the message and trying to get you to think and to maybe laugh sometimes. But maybe in the last couple of years, some of my subject matter has gotten a lot more serious. So, but these ones, are kind of a little bit, this one's a little maybe more serious, and this one is definitely a little more lighthearted, but it's still a serious topic, it's talking about, women in the workplace, right? And, and the difference that still exists between the old boys club and the women who are trying to break in. It says, a strip of bacon will poke through just about anything, right? Bring home the bacon, invisible on the job, right? And here she is with her big pipe at the table, but the table is still all the old boys club. And the same with this one, you've got the man and the woman, and you've got this whole, very, just a lot of imagery about, something professional again, like working for the airlines and working in, those more technical kinds of jobs, but then she's still the one who's holding the world. The woman in the back is pulling the strings, so I'm always kind of trying to, layer a lot of messages into my work. But then sometimes I'm just trying to have fun. So there's a lot of intentional and unintentional that happens in my work. You start cutting things out, and then you see something else, and it leads to another idea, right? So that's my stuff.
Next up, Andrew Gursky.
Hello. So my piece it's actually called Two Memories, and I wanted to focus on the idea that nostalgia means something. It just has an individual feel to it, right? And when we grew up, really exemplifies maybe those ideas or technological items that we remember as nostalgia. And I kind of wanted to share the dualities between stuff from 40 years ago when the radios were the size of this cabinet to now radios are on our iPhones. And it's sort of this idea that the landscape is similar because they share similar attributes of composition and things like that, but the landscape itself is dramatically different. Just between how the information is shared and received and how we in turn remember that. So it was just, I had the initial idea of just, I think, a modern one came first, and then I went to the old-fashioned one. But yeah, that was just something I wanted to do. And I'm very new to collage, so this is my first show. But yeah, it's just. That's sort of what I was going for.
First of many.
Yeah. How many, just out of curiosity, how many of the artists here, it's your first show that you're in?
Wow.
Anthony Michael Ryder.
I have two other pieces around the corner as well, but I wanted to talk about the materiality of why I chose collage for this show. Collage is uniquely suited to explore narrative, cultural landscapes and rebellion. It can also be used in identity shaped by loss and adversity. By its nature, collage combines pieces into one image, making it an ideal format to visualize how a person's identity can be formed from joyful and painful alike. In the context of trauma and complex grief, identity often feels discontinuous or in pieces, as the reconstruction and reassemblage of these pieces can reclaim one's narrative and power. It engages with nostalgia not as a sentimental longing, but as a dynamic process of reassembling and interrogating the past, reflecting the fragmented yet involving nature of personal and collective past. I created all these works after witnessing my mother's murder, and so through that process and going through court proceedings and unfortunately the state and family betrayal, reassembling these pieces kind of made me investigate how I can start trusting in relationships again and dealing with that loss. So by doing that, I was reflecting on memory, I was reflecting on the loss and presence of a mother. Grew up with a single mom, so that was a very hard loss for me. I'm still dealing with that. And so like by reinterrogating and reassembling that pieces, it felt like I was in control of a hopeless situation. And it kind of allowed me to regain that power aside from, court proceedings and different things like that. So a lot of this is kind of reflective of that. You got the hand kind of giving the gesture of giving medicine, or both to my mother, who was also going through cancer at the time. And so it also was like doing psychiatric meds and that different kind of thing. So a lot of these pieces is just kind of re-exploring that memory, that fragmentation, and then kind of rebuilding off of that into a new identity or a new piece. And I don't know, it just kind of regained that power, and it was nice to create some pieces that people thought were beautiful but didn't know the context of it. And so I kind of liked being able to create some of these pieces and having people come up and being like, oh, this is really pretty. I like the dynamic, positioning of the colors around it. And so it was kind of nice to, create something beautiful out of all that. And thank you for coming here. It was nice to not just present in court, but be able to present something and have everyone be part of that and be heard in a more holistic approach versus just trauma. And thank you for being part of the collective.
Pan their artwork so the whole group can see it before they sit down, that would be amazing. Because it's hard to see on the sides.
Also, FYI, anybody, if any of these pieces are purchased, part of the proceeds will also go to a nonprofit for domestic violence.
Next up, please welcome Corey Peak.
We're tired. Thanks to the collective, thanks to the gallery. This is awesome. It's a beautiful space. So this is mine. My work is a little trauma-based too, and I'm not even sure it's collage because it's all tape. There's no glue involved. My work is really about memory and anxiety, kind of the dual-edged sword of memory. These started out as something completely different, but they evolved after a really kind of traumatic breakup, and after that breakup I moved back to my hometown because my parents were getting older, so I took a year off from my job to be with them and trying to convince them to go in assisted living. That didn't work. And these really became a response to my mother's dementia and her loss of memory. And the anxiety that produced in me and my dad and the rest of the family, and the frustration that it produced in her. So the tape and the charcoal, the way it's holding the image together, is I wanted you to get the mark making, the sense of that anxiety, but also the tape as a sense of desperation to hold that memory together. and I hope that comes through. Use boats a lot, use ladders a lot, I use beds a lot. For me, they all are kind of symbolic of ways that we can kind of transcend our limitations. We can float on water suddenly, we can climb a ladder and defy gravity, or however you want to think about it, and dream in bed. So they're related to that. And the other thing I'll say, you'll notice that most of the boats are rowboats too, because I like that idea of you're moving forward, but you're looking back while you're moving. I know we don't have time for questions now, but I'll be around afterwards, so feel free to talk to me about any of this. I love to answer questions. So I think that's it. I'm trying to keep it under 3 minutes.
Thank you to the Pacific Northwest Collage Collective and the Cave for your support and this opportunity. This is my first ever art show. Arriving here has unfolded via a prestige of personal experiences. From carefully crafted backyard mud pies to a scary choice I made to abandon a money-making college plan and instead get a degree in art history. From watching my mother transform herself from teaching elementary school into teaching high school art. She immersed herself in college art classes and ended up with a vibrant studio practice using a broad range of mediums. From my early career as a rare book conservator, intertwined with being a veteran, a single mom, and with an unrelenting drive towards trying to be perfect. My collage work is a reflection of it all. My trained eye for color, design, and composition. Both finding and making time in my life to create art. Working to let go of self-criticism. Seeking a diverse, supportive, and inspiring collage community. The two pieces I have in this show are at somewhat opposite ends for me creatively. The Princess and the Pea was carefully cut, measured, and executed. Thank you to Colette Elliott for her minimalist design inspiration and generous feedback at my first PNWCC group collage session in December of 2024. We may long for the fantasy of a happy ending, but life often demonstrates the absurdity of that hope. I love collage for the capacity it has to reframe a cultural narrative, in this instance with humor, oddity, and a fun poke at black and white thinking. As a child, I loved fairy tales like The Princess and the Pea. For the unpredictability of my young life, they offered comfort, articulated boundaries, and often communicated the triumph of good over evil. My second piece, Faye Imagines a Collage Life, which I almost didn't submit, by the way, comes from a very different place. This is from a time when I was able to sit in my studio and start creating intuitively, letting the colors and textures appear layer after layer. The mixed media collage artist Ava Callian, who I discovered on Instagram, is an inspiration for the freedom of her work, especially mark making. My experiments with different media over the past couple of years gave me the confidence to mix it up using hand-decorated, stamped, and found collage papers, watercolor crayons, charcoal, and watercolors. I collect discarded historic black and white photos and use them as inspiration to imagine a life each subject could have lived. This multimedia collage was created in one sitting, which is unusual for me. I like the challenge of working from my gut, and here I was able to slip into a state of flow. I imagined a life of artistic joy without self-judgment and gifted this to Faye, which is the name I found on the back of the photo. As I continue my art-making journey, I look forward to staying connected with this community, experiencing joy, and finding ways to break the rules. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Darian. And I've been doing collage for the last 6 years or so, but I've never really been a traditional artist. I can't paint, I can't draw, I have no skills like that. When I was in college, I did a lot of installation art, so I'd make immersive rooms that people would enter to kind of evoke feeling. And part of the practice of installation, at least my practice, was responding to the space. So I'd find a window and then kind of take the light from that window to create an experience for someone. And after the pandemic, when I couldn't make rooms anymore for people to go into, I kind of transitioned to making collages, but I felt like I was missing some of the core fundamentals of my practice. So what I ended up kind of transitioning my collages into was a response to the thing I'm putting the collage in. So I started thrifting objects like glass frames, mirrors, things that have a lot of the same materials and reflective qualities of the installations I used to produce. And then just kind of created what I describe as like lace on top of them. So a lot of my collages kind of are subjects intertwined with natural elements, and most often on reflective or see-through surfaces. So I really like the play of the world kind of happening around the collage. But yeah, that's kind of all I have to share.
Yeah.
So I really enjoyed being in this group. I'm really grateful.
Can you hold up your work?
Yeah.
I'm kind of new to collage. I dabbled in art for a long time and ended up taking a mixed media class with Erin Catherine. And both of these images came out of that class and they turned into collages. I was just going to talk about the process more than anything because it's new to do a collage. But the idea of this class was to make little tiny collages really fast and rapidly and study. And what I was doing is I was trying to be really abstract, but I had been sketching a lot of railroad buildings that interest me historically. And then the idea was to make a painting of this. And what happened to me was I was like, this is cool. The collage was fun. I want to go big with it. And so both of these were basically abstraction of those, or not abstraction, but bringing those collages up. And I painted my own types of paper and things to build the layers. And I'm an architect, so you can see it's almost constructed like a building would be, which I found fascinating. So I'm really excited to do more of this. I think this one actually became an exercise, if you look at it really closely, of just layering. I just kept putting more and more layers and cutting back. And I found that really fascinating. So there is like all of the junk mail and everything Amazon sent me layered in here along with other stuff. There's a few things that aren't painted, and then there is acrylic paint on there. But I'm pretty excited. I'm glad to be in a show. This is the second show I've been in with artwork. And yeah, learned a lot from this. Nice to see everyone looking at it. So.
Thank you, Jason. It was so fun to watch all the artwork come in, either from out of town into my garage or like as people walked in with it. It just kept making me gasp in different ways. And it's like, when I think the general public thinks of collage, they think of Ransom Notes or like the cover of like the Sex Pistols album. And it's astonishing, like the range of different techniques and expressions and subject matter. It's so various. Yeah. Kathleen Price.
Hi. I am relatively new to collage. I was introduced to collage in the fall of 2021 as an art practice by my partner Kevin Samsel and the Pacific Northwest Collage Collective. And most of my life I felt drawn to creative practice, but in the sense of like crafting or sewing or something that had a utility or like a gift that I could present to someone. So discovering collage as an art practice was revelatory for me, and the first time that I actually felt that I had a voice as an artist. I still feel like I'm developing my voice and my art practice. And in a way, these two pieces reflect the different ways that I produce art or sit down and do art. This, it's kind of it was a work in progress. I really developed the concept. I did some drafts, redid the elements a few times. I had this photo for a really long time, wasn't sure what I wanted to do with it. And then this piece, I actually made this when I was on vacation. And usually when I'm on vacation, I'll take a few art journals and some, material, some cutouts, and created this just really, really quickly. But as far as this relates to nostalgia, in general, I use a lot of Life magazines and from like the 40s and 50s and 60s, and just always really struck by the ads and like the beauty, the way they present the appliances in the cars, and thinking about like heteronormative marriage in the 50s and 60s and the promise of freedom in the appliances for women, freedom from drudgery. Your life would be so easy if you had the Frigidaire, and the promise of the open road, and coming out of World War II, and how that like kind of becomes a through line to us now, and people in my generation growing up with that expectation put on us by our families for the most part, and the church of consumption and the church of the marriage industrial complex, and how we relate to that today. And then, that's a different concept of this piece. I made it on vacation. It was summertime, and I really have this like bittersweet feeling at the end of every summer. It's like the end of something, this weather is changing. I feel like Persephone going back down into the darkness. And so yeah, when I made that, it evoked a feeling in me. Oh, thank you.
Thanks. So Kirk is the one who actually introduced me to collage. I was at a Radical Fairy gathering. He showed up at the table and collage, and I sat down. When I was a kid, my grandmother would throw magazines at us and make up some wheat paste, and we would glue things together. And so I kind of it was some kid activity. And then Kirk basically showed me that collage was actually it is a kid activity, but it can also be a high art form. And I basically started collaging. A few years ago, I read a book by Alan de Botton called Artist Therapy, when he's talking about how the institutions of art have failed us by not helping us engage with art as an audience, and that art can be therapy, art can be many things. And oftentimes my art practice is therapy. I take pictures that interest me or that catch my attention. In this one specifically, Freak Show, I was somebody actually pulled this off a wine bottle. They put hot water in it and slowly peeled it off to give it to me. And then as I was kind of playing with the image, this school building popped up, and all and in here there's a reporter being arrested. And so it's kind of, I put this together during the beginning of the Palestinian conflict, and so it just kind of came together, and so oftentimes my art comes together, and then I realize what's going on in my unconscious, what's wanting to come out, and how I feel about things. Also, this kind of became even more, you have all this, the freak show going on behind, where everybody's kind of the normality, we're pretending that things are normal behind this, behind the scenes they're not, and it becomes even more, I guess. In some ways, I feel like maybe I was seeing, it feels like I was seeing into the future, because this is more, what's going on nowadays seems to be more, there's more of a clown show going on as things are, unraveling sort of in some ways. So I kind of feel like this art is kind of political as well as therapeutic, as I understand it. In this piece right here, I was kind of playing with the idea of time, growing up with this idea of like eternity and salvation, and if I make the wrong decision, I'm going to be, I'm going to ruin my eternal whatever salvation. And so sometimes what I found as an adult, I would be stuck in a decision. I couldn't make a decision, because even simple as should I rent this apartment, or should I buy this car, should I even get this meal, could turn into this whole problem, because what if I make the wrong decision, and that has some eternal consequences. And so this is just kind of me grasping with the idea of time, that really any decision has an end. It all will end at some point, and it's not all going to result in eternal something or other. And so this is just embracing the idea of change, and that be fearless, and I can be fearless in some simple decision like what I'm going to eat, and it's not going to affect my eternity that I have no concept of, and who knows if it anyways. It's just, so here's basically my art is a way for me to process whatever kind of emotions going on, and I just kind of pick pieces images that just grab my attention, and then I put them together, and then I have a better concept of what emotional process I'm going through because I can see it now in an image versus it's just some vague concept or a vague emotion, and then I take these images that are really grabbing my attention and I put them together, and then I basically understand myself better. So that's kind of, my art is my therapy. And this is my first art show, and I'm really excited to find collage as a way to kind of express myself. So thank you.
I moved to Portland in 2020, and my friend Joshua James Amberson, who's a local writer, just gave me a download of people and organizations to get connected to, and one of those people was Kevin Samsel, who. Have you guys ever played that game, 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon, where every actor is related to Kevin Bacon? Kevin Samsel is the Kevin Bacon of the collage world. And so many people have a story where he's put them in their first show, or brought them into the Collage Collective, or it's something. So, Kevin Samsel.
Thank you. Thanks, Kurt. Thanks, Colette. Thanks, everyone here that's in the show. I have 3 pieces in here, but I'm going to talk about these 2 specifically. I started really getting into collage 2014, and just kind of became obsessed and started collaging a lot and spending, hours at a time collaging the kitchen table. And, at first I was doing sort of, stuff that was maybe a little more minimal, a little more intentional with just a few images kind of clashed together. And as time went on, when you do something a lot, you try to challenge yourself or kind of get outside your comfort zone a little bit. And sometimes I'm good at that and sometimes I'm bad at it. I still haven't learned how to actually paint or draw or anything, so paint frightens me when it comes to collaging, and someday I'll have paint in my collages. But one of the things I started doing a few years ago was these pieces I call quilt collages. A lot of magazines, I've always used old magazines, but specifically magazines from 30s, 40s, 50s, would often, magazines like Collier's, Saturday Evening Post, would publish short stories. And the short stories would often be accompanied by these kind of painted illustrations. And there was lots of action usually, like a guy running for a car, or a woman grabbing an animal or something. And so there's a lot of motion. All the clothes were beautifully painted with all the wrinkles and textures, the movement. So I just kind of started cutting out just swaths of these different pieces of clothing. And you can kind of do that too. Another source I used was Sears robot catalogs from the 50s. A lot of those would be photos, but you could kind of see that they were sort of touched up, in some way. So I cut out a lot of these pieces. And I've created a lot of quilt collages, but you can kind of see various textures in a collage like this. This is a little bit different because I did put this woman sort of in the forefront, and I felt like that kind of tied it together for that collage. And then this one, and I'm doing most of these on wood panels, so they're kind of they're really nice, ready-made, ready to put on the wall. And this one, I just tried to use this white background kind of wood panel to create more negative space. I didn't really like the look of the wood color necessarily, so with the wood ones I tried to cover all the wood space, and with this one I had a little bit more negative space. And then and I always have I feel like I have a sense of nostalgia in a lot of my work. maybe a nostalgia for like a time before I was alive. You know, I was born in 1967, so a lot of the stuff is like from early 60s, 50s, 40s. So I don't know exactly why that is, but maybe it's just because I wasn't around during those times, so it seems more interesting to me. So, and then I affixed this slide on the top, which is kind of fun. So this one was in the window over there, which was fun to see because you could kind of see the sunlight going through the slide of this old couple smiling very authentically and happy. It's really sweet. So thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to thank the Pacific Northwest Collage Collective and Art in the Cave for letting me show my pieces. I call what I do organic impressionism. I've been doing it for about 15 years. I started off just using flowers, but as I went along and developed more images, I had to use like leaves and bark and root and seeds and everything else that kind of comes out of the ground. And I used to laminate these pieces. But I've stopped doing that for about the last 5 years because I've found there was more, it was just better to have, well, it's kind of hard to explain. The lamination would preserve things, and in some things it helped, but in other things it didn't help because the heat of the lamination would change the organic plants, and some would like just fade out, and others would fade a little bit. And so it's kind of odd, like in some cases it actually helped the pictures, but in other cases it would kind of like destroy them. So I ended up stopping doing that, and I try to use material that's already been around a long time because I've been doing this for 15 years. I'm still going through stuff that I, collected my first year. So those things are pretty stabilized. And even though it does change, that's kind of the nature of things anyway. And so I use like UV glass, and I try to pick things that I, think will last long. I know a little bit about the colors, and it's just kind of a learning process. I mean, you can't really know until you do it, and then you have to wait years to see if it's going to hold up or not. But some things do hold up, like hydrangeas. I don't have any hydrangeas here. Or a blue that stays, and that's blues kind of tend to break down. So it's just kind of a learning curve. These particular images are from black and white photos taken in the mid-20th century in rural Washington. And the part of it that I would do is interpret the black and white picture, try to bring it to color. And this was taken on a back porch of a house, kind of it was a darker picture. And just the nature of it, I would go with these sepia tones and stuff because it would keep it, I knew it would be stable. I've worked with that way before, and it sort of seemed to match the picture. Whereas this one was outside, and it had, sunlight in it, and so it needed some color. And it faded a little bit, but I really liked the way it turned out. I used corn silks for the trellises, and in the actual picture, you can barely see the trellis, but when you were making it, your eyes would kind of like focus on it because the diamond shape. So it's weird, like how something you don't even think of actually becomes the center of the picture, is kind of unintentionally. And I used, this one doesn't have as much, but I've done landscapes that have a lot of depth in these things, like we're almost, I've used a couple of shadow boxes and some things where the dimension is such that, you couldn't run it through a laminator anyway, and you couldn't get into a regular frame. And so some of these are kind of like the standard ones I use, but I've had to do thicker things. I did an image of a sea urchin that had to be put into a shadow box because it had spines on it that were like 1.5 inches long, and it couldn't be printed or photographed with the shadows and stuff. And so it's but I've really enjoyed working with this medium. And it's not, I've always loved collage, but I've somehow, while I got into it, I bought a luggage tag in Hawaii for a bookmark, and that kind of led to making bookmarks, which led to making postcards, then went to pictures, and just kind of like one thing after the other. But it's kind of odd, like when you can remember I don't know what I would have done if I hadn't bought that card, because I had gone to art school and I just kind of dropped out of it. But then when I started doing these flower pictures, people were interested in it. And so my life just changed. It's all I've been doing for 15 years. And I think back all the time about, if I had stopped and bought that luggage tag, where would my life be? So anyway, I'm here now, and this is what I do. And so thank you very much for letting me.
Thanks. I'm Todd. I don't know why I did the TR, I guess to be fancy. But I did that poll there. It's called pre-pandemic sign pole litter. And that's what the city calls it when you deface their precious telephone poles with flyers. So when I moved here in 2016, I was fascinated by the poles and how everything got layered on there like a collage and torn. And people would even go through and tear down an inch or so deep until they got to something like that. And it's all moldy. You can see the mold there on her face. It's kind of a... so I took pictures for 4 years of all the sign poles. And then when the pandemic hit and I had time, I printed all the photos out and tore them into pieces and put them on the pole. And it's made from a hollow tube that they pour concrete in. So the cardboard is about that thick. And I wedged 2 of the 4-inch poles together. And it's kind of about the size of a maypole if I was going to make a maypole. So I kind of want to drag it out there and put ribbons on it and dance around it. So thanks.
A quick story about this. We just saw a picture of it, and it was just, and I was like, oh, it's like a section of a telephone pole, and he described it as freestanding, and I was like, looking at telephone poles going, they wouldn't be freestanding. But I didn't get too far into it, and I was a performance artist in San Francisco, and there were all these times where I would do wild things in other people's rented and owned buildings. And I was like ready to go to bat for this to be installed here, and I noted that there were eye hooks on the ceiling, and I was just like rehearsing in my head how I could like make this happen. And then I got to his living room, and I found out it was a concrete molding tube, and it was light as hell, and it was fine. And I was thinking like, there's gonna be staples. The nurse kicked in. I was like, will people touch it and they have their tetanus shots? Just the things we think. Please welcome another person who is like such a connective tissue in the collage community, and she is so generous, and everyone is connected to you, Sherry. Sherry Sabwat-Hintari.
So people always ask where I get some of my materials, and I hang out at different historical societies, so that's where I get a lot of my vintage newspapers from. This one is from 1968. This lady is like a holy grail. I was looking for her for years, and when Anne had Collage Camp, which will happen again in November, I found her in one of Anne's magazines that she brought. So this is called Ladies Who Lunch, and these are the ladies that are out to lunch with their lipsticks. I used to be a hairdresser, and for 26 years, and when I first got the job, they're like, "You're gonna have to wear lipstick." And I said, "Oh, okay, that makes you a better hairdresser, I'll wear lipstick." So now I don't have to wear lipstick. because I'm just a full-time collage artist. And I do collage because of Kevin. Anyways, that's it. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sissy Kyler. I've been collaging for about 15 years. I took a really intense job and I needed some way to process things, and so I started doing collage, and I specialized in mermaid cats. So I did a lot of mermaid cats for a very long time. And then Februage happened and I started branching out a little bit. And so this was from Februage this year, except when I got the prompt for this show, which thank you so much for having me. It's NoStalgia. And so I wrote this because I knew I'd get nervous. This is, the title of my collage is, Let's Make Sure Everybody Gets a Chance to Play. It's, when I was younger in the 70s, growing up in San Francisco, I believed that this is where we were well on our way to an inclusive, diverse society. I'm nostalgic for that sense of hope. It feels as though we have lost our way in so many levels. I find myself always wanting to envision a way forward by exploring the past. This collage includes a 1936 illustration from an Alice and Jerry book, a 1956 National Geographic photo of a village in the Scottish Highlands, and a 1978 photo of a group of kids in a California park. And then on the back is a little lady peeking out, a person of color. So, thank you so much.
Can we get at least one of the other shirts? Hi, I'm Dale. This is last minute. This is my first exhibit, and I didn't think I could really have anything to say, but since there are other newcomers, I thought, okay. So I've been doing collage again for about a year and a half, but about 20 years ago I was doing it and taking classes and stuff. I've had 3 careers. One is interior design, one was advertising, and one was video production. I don't do any of that anymore, and so I've had this need to create things. And what always drives me, the first thing is always color palette. And I love paper, and I'm always collecting paper and images. So I never have any idea what a collage is going to look like, because I'm just starting with a piece that I want, and then what goes with that, what goes with that, what goes with that. I have no idea, and I end up with this, and then I had to come up with a name. And this one's called Gateway to Heaven. Same thing here. I had that piece and was determined to somehow use it in a collage and build around it. And ultimately, I destroyed this piece. It isn't what it really looked like. I took, sandpaper and went over it, and but all of that was just because I was in love with this one piece. This was a purse. This was a melted frying pan, but again, it was the color and the form that drove the whole thing. I looked at it and thought, what is it? I have to name it, and it's called Grandfather's Kimono, just because I have sleeves here that look like a kimono. So my husband is a fine art photographer, and sometimes he gives me mistakes out of the printer to cut up and use for pieces. And he gave me this piece, and the color was off. This was supposed to be redder. And copper is my favorite metal, and I loved it, and I thought, I'm going to work right on it. And so from that, again, palette drove the whole thing. And I had that face that was from a National Geographic magazine, and I knew I had to do something with that face, and that face drove this whole thing. So, and it's called Meeting of the Minds, just because I ended up with enough faces and minds on there. And, but again, the whole thing for me is color. And thank you. Thank you for reading this.
I'm sorry, I said the wrong name. Christine Maitland.
You want to put it on there? Hi, I'm new to collage. I started about 5 years ago, and this is my piece. I'm a retired union organizer. I didn't have time for art because I spent 30 years on the road. But when I retired, I started listening to poetry, and then I got excited about doing collage. And the first show I had here was during the COVID. They had a COVID show, so everything needed to be related to that. So anyway, this is called the butterfly, what did I call this? The butterfly effect, which in chaos theory, the flap of a butterfly wing can cause a storm across the globe. And so I really wanted to show how small things can impact the future. And it's made from acrylic paint skins, which you pour acrylic paint on plastic and you let it dry, and you can't stir it, but you can cut through the layers. So like if you see the different layers of paint, because you can slice through it and then you let it dry for a week, and you can cut the pieces out and glue them down and make collage out of them. I just joined the cooperative, and it's been fun meeting everybody in that. And I do come occasionally here to the collage sessions here at the cave. So it's fun to do it as a cooperative. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Templeton Elliott. I'm married to Colette Elliott, so that's where a lot of my inspiration comes from. This piece, it's called Foot Plant. It's 3 frames from a photo sequence from a 1980s skateboard magazine. I kind of mixed them up. They're like out of order, which I was a little bit bummed about when I did it, but I think it kind of works visually, so it's fine. Yeah, I mean, I like to create these little cube collages and kind of create like a little world, a little planet. Like the breaking the frame stuff, that all comes from Colette. Like she kind of brought that into my consciousness, and I was like, that's cool, I'm gonna steal that idea. So that's kind of where that comes from. And I'm a skateboarder, lifelong skateboarder, so like, I don't know, that's kind of like who I am above anything else, being a skateboarder. So, you know, skate stuff is always inspirational to me, but also always like, it's like harder than getting random materials, because it's like, you know, all the skaters have like some kind of story behind them. It's like, is this skater cool? Do I want to spend time with this person? Do I want to like, you know, create art with this guy who's cool or he's not cool, but like the photo looks cool. So there's always that kind of stuff. But this 80s stuff, like I don't know who that guy is. It's like a little bit before my time. So it's easier to kind of, you know, just use stuff that looks good. Yeah, that's kind of what it is. Just a cube collage. And there's no real meaning behind it. It's just fun to do. That's me.
I wanted to start by saying, like, a lot of you have thanked the collective. Kirk and I also want to thank you. I was talking with my husband at dinner last night, and we were talking about what brings you joy. It was just kind of a thing that came up in conversation, and I said my collage community. You know, that you guys, this is my happy place. You know, and some of you I don't know, most of you I do know. And so thank you for that, because I'm dealing with chronic pain issues. I have a spinal condition. And the collage community, I kind of started it because of that, because I needed people around me. I needed something accessible. I also needed therapy. A lot of you have talked about using collage as therapy. I highly recommend it. It has gotten me through some really rough times. A lot of times, the people I pick out aren't necessarily smiling. It's usually, the way they look is the way I feel at that time. This woman was a lot smaller, and I wanted to challenge myself for this show and work larger. So she was only like a couple inches tall. I brought the image to Kinko's, enlarged it this size. And then I do a process called a tape transfer. So you put tape, and this image is from a French magazine. So you put just packing tape, clear packing tape across it. If you look closely, you'll see strips. And then you soak it in water for 20 minutes, and you peel off the magazine, and all of the ink transfers onto the tape. It's a process I learned about 15 years ago. I'm an art teacher, so I do this kind of stuff all the time. But a lot of people tend to keep the rectangle of what the strips make, and I like to cut to the actual image. So that's a little bit different process that I do. Anyway, so tape transfer, and then it's like deciding what's gonna be behind it. When I was thinking about this piece, I miss riding my bike with my husband, that guy. I miss being free. We moved here to go hiking and stuff, and I can't anymore. So a lot of my work is like what I wish, what I hope. Often you'll see birds in my work. That is a desire to be free of pain. So anyway, clouds in general look really cool under tape transfer. That is also a visual choice. And then I added the bikers down here. And then the background is piano roll. I went to Scrap in Portland, and they had a couple of these piano rolls, and I was like, cool, so like clear piano rolls of paper. And I was like, oh, that's a cool background. So I bought a couple of them, and I use them in my backgrounds a lot. But anyway, this is a tape transfer process. The hair I separate. I think this is only in 2 pieces. So I did brown paper behind the hair. And then this is like Arizona highways, and I think this is National Geographic. If, not to be too cheesy, but if you're interested in learning this process, I'm actually doing a workshop on it in July in Selwood, Portland. So I'd be happy to teach you. And if you want more information, just let me know. But that is my piece. Thank you so much, Art at the Cave.
Yeah.
It's been a wonderful relationship from the beginning. It's been wonderful working with you all. I'm so grateful for the relationship that we've built. This is a beautiful space. You guys put the show up beautifully. I think we all feel honored to be hanging in this gallery right now. So thank you so much. Seriously. All right.
Ta-ta.
Follow us on Instagram.
People
Book art.